Welcome back to the Life of the Party podcast. I'm your boy once again, MC Ricky, and I'm going all the way back to the beginnings for this episode. I'm talking about the Yokota Tigers. Ohio. Ohio gozaimasu. First Japanese word I learned. Ohio, raised overseas in Japan. Ohio, land of the rising sun. Ohio, yeah, that's right, it's time to have some fun. Ohio, first Japanese word I learned. Ohio, raised overseas in Japan. Ohio, land of the rising sun. Ohio, yeah, that's right, it's time to have some fun. Ohio. Welcome back to the Life of the Party podcast. I'm your boy once again, MC Ricky, and I'm going all the way back to the beginnings. My first episode, remember I mentioned the Yokota Tigers in the beginnings, so I thought, well, let me go ahead and let you know a little bit about the Yokota Tigers, what my experience was, once again, from my perspective, just, enlighten you about how entertaining and how fun and how much of delight this was for my childhood. And in the beginnings, I mentioned a little bit of what inspired me growing up, what I went through my childhood on the way to becoming a host MC. So what is the Yokota Tigers? All right, so I may have mentioned this. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the beginnings episode, but the Yokota Tigers basically is a baseball team, a youth baseball team, all right? So there's three different levels of the Yokota Tigers, all right? There's a minor league, a major league, and a senior league. So to further contextualize what the Yokota Tigers are, so you remember I mentioned in the beginnings that I grew up overseas in Japan on the military Air Force base, the Yokota Air Force Base, Tokyo, Japan. Now, on this particular Air Force base, they have a number of youth services like baseball. At the time, they didn't have football, but they had soccer, they had basketball, and other things that you can partake in if you wanted to. So it was a really tremendous time, I think, for myself to kind of get into sports and see if that's something that I wanted to continue on. And beyond that, sports is an excellent way to kind of learn and to grow up as a child and as you get into your teenage and then your adult life. So you meet a lot of people, you hold on to a lot of relationships, and that all stems from those first activities that you get into when you're a child. So Yokota Tigers was definitely one. Now, as far as the individual leagues, you had the minor league, which was pretty much 9 to 10-year-olds. You had the major league, which was 11 and 12-year-olds, and then you had the senior leagues, which was 13 and 14-year-olds. Now, depending on when your birthday lied in between those different leagues, you could have somebody who may be a little bit older, but once again, there is like a time period for those type of stipulations. But I'm going to go ahead and make this a 3-part series just because there's 3 different leagues and I played in all 3 different leagues. So I thought, well, let me go ahead and kind of talk about the Yokota Tigers and how it was for me in the minor leagues, how I got into baseball, this, that, and the other. Then the second part, I'll go ahead and talk about the major leagues. I'm a little bit older, and then the senior leagues as I got even older as middle school, and then I started to make that trek on up into the high school level. All right, so I'll go ahead and I'll start with the minor leagues. So before I got into minor leagues, so I was a little bit younger, once again, 9 to 10 years old is when the Yokota Tigers basically started. So I mentioned before that they have the youth services leagues that you can participate in. I think you pay like X amount to go ahead and participate, and then you're basically placed in a pool, and there's volunteers that will coach the teams. They say they just randomly pick people from these pools, but there are some politicking and some favoritism that comes into play, because depending on the sport or how good you were or whatnot, there were certain teams that seem to be always stacked. All right, won't call out the individuals, the coaches, or the players, but I think, and some of my friends, if they watch this podcast or listen to it, they can instantaneously, that team was stacked. Yeah, there's no way in the world that was at random. They just picked, all right? So anyway, that was pretty much the traditional way of going about the youth services. Everybody could participate and everyone had a chance to play. But anyway, I got into the Yokota Tigers. I think every parent can relate to this. It's like you want to get your kids into some type of activity. It doesn't necessarily have to be sports, but sports was something that was very prevalent in my family. So my mom played tennis
and she participated in things like jazzercise back in the 80s and things of that nature. So she was always active and doing things sports related, or she was always into sports fitness. And my dad, I mentioned before, he was a basketball player. He also played baseball as well, but he was primarily known for being a basketball player. He's a coach, and he coached me and my brother, and he coached a lot of people on this installation. And so basketball and baseball, and of course football. Football, I think for any typical American, is something you kind of grow up with. But when I was growing up, they didn't have football, in the youth services. Now, we would always play football with my friends and everything. We played touch football, if you know what touch football is. Actually, a lot of times we played tackle football. Most of the time we played tackle football. But to get back to what I'm talking about with the Yokota Tigers is my parents took me when I was younger to get into sports was t-ball. So for those who don't know what t-ball is, I'm pretty sure you know what t-ball is. Basically, you have a tee, and it sits so high. You have a baseball, you put the baseball on there, you put it at home plate, and then you go ahead and hit it. It simulates the action of a pitcher actually throwing the ball from the mound to you to hit the ball. So when you're younger, hand-eye coordination is not, as good as it's going to be later on as you progress through your life. So put the ball on the tee and you hit it, and then there's X amount outs or runs that you can score in t-ball, just because you want to make it fair for all the kids, because like I said, the hand-eye coordination is not really all there at that point in time. But for some kids it is. Some kids develop in other ways. Some people may be really good at math, some people are really good at video games, some people are really good at drawing, some people are really good at sports. I just don't want to make this think like, because I was good at sports or certain people are good at sports, then you're just better than everyone else. No, everyone has their own thing that they hold dear and that makes them unique and special. So I was recently speaking to my father and my dad about the Yokota Tigers. And the reason why I was speaking with him, of course, we all love our parents. I love my dad, I love my mom. I wanted to, kind of get his perspective from how it was for him being a dad, kind of living vicariously through me in that moment. Because like I said, I was really young at that time, and there's certain things I remember or certain feelings that I have, but I don't know every single aspect of it. There's certain things I was trying to remember. So I just spoke to him, and he gave me some greater perspective. So I appreciate him for that. I was trying to figure out, how did I get into baseball? They wanted to get me something to get me outdoors, to get me involved in sports and be active rather than just staying at home. So the t-ball really helped out with that. What really kind of put me over the edge and what my dad was kind of surprised about is on Yokota Air Force Base, they have this field. It's called Wilkins Park. So all my Yokota fam or alumni will remember Wilkins Park. Now, actually, Wilkins Park is not there anymore. They actually built over Wilkins Park. They tore it down, they built over it. They now have this Japan self-defense aspect of the Japanese military there now. But back then, there's this place called Wilkins Park, and it was a big baseball stadium. And on the other side of the fence, where the outfield was, there was a smaller park that was used for all the youth services teams who play t-ball. But my dad told me that he remembered that there was something different about me the first time that he played catch with me. Of course, they bought me a glove, they bought me cleats, my parents, that is. And my dad was playing catch with me for the first time. And he was just kind of taken away by how I was picking it up so quickly and so easily. He was throwing the ball and I was catching it. First, he started underhand and I was catching it. So then he said, okay, let me try overhand. And I started catching it or whatnot. So I guess you can say that I was more or less like a natural when it came to playing that sport. He saw that kind of early. T-ball usually starts, if you start really young, I believe it starts like around 5. I don't think I was that young. But like I said, the minors was like 9 to 10 years old. So I played a little bit in the youth services, but then I was actually playing on the Yokota Tigers. Now, there was this particular coach who was in the military, and he volunteered his time to coach the Yokota Tigers. His name was Coach Hawkins. I never forget him. He coached me in the minors and the majors. He was one of the assistant head coaches on the Yokota Tigers for that 9 to 10-year-old, and his son Victor was also there as well. But he actually approached my dad because he was basically looking for talent. Now, the reason why I've talked so much so far about the youth services is because, like I mentioned, youth services was like that place if you want to get your kids into sports, but you just want them to, to play, and you're not really so serious about taking it to the next level. I don't want to say it's not competitive, but There is a considerable difference between the Yokota Tigers baseball team and the regular youth services, or Boys and Girls Club is what I believe they would call it now. The Yokota Tigers is basically an AAU team. I'm trying to contextualize so you can kind of really understand how it is. Basically, we were like the Yokota based AAU team for baseball. Baseball is America's pastime. I think everybody knows and understands that in America. If you have ever been to Japan, or not even if you've even been to Japan, there's a lot of Japanese baseball stars that make it in the Japanese professional league, and then they go over to the United States of America to play. A number of stars, most notably you had Hideo Nomo, the pitcher who played with the Dodgers, Ichiro Suzuki, who is a member of the Oryx Blue Wave before he went to the Seattle Mariners, Hideki Matsui, who played for the Yomiuri Giants, which is basically like the Yankees of Japan, and before he actually went to the Yankees, won a World Series, and I believe he won an MVP and stuff like that. So there have been a number of Japanese stars that have been great enough to go to the United States and play exceptionally well in the major leagues. So as much as baseball is America's pastime, in Japan, it is as well. There's three pretty much major sports you can associate with Japan from my perspective, but you have sumo, which goes back a number of years, and then you have soccer, of course. Soccer is the world sport, of football is what they call it in Europe or other parts of the world. In America, we call it soccer. And then you have baseball. With baseball being so big in Japan, there's so many people that live in Japan, you have so many cities that have their own teams. So it was only right that why not have Yokota have one of these teams? I only played 1 year in the minor league before I moved up to the majors. But the thing is with the Japanese leagues is that the Japanese players and the coaches are extremely disciplined. In order for us to be able to compete, this is years ago, the Yokota Tigers was not for the faint of heart. There were tryouts. So for 9, 10-year-olds, for 11, 12-year-olds, 13 to 14-year-olds, you had to try out for the team every year. And the Yokota Tigers lasted the entire year, pretty much mirrored the Major League Baseball season. But we played year-round, I want to say about 8 to 9 months. And we always played on Sundays, and we practiced at least 3 times a week. You spent a lot of time just kind of honing your craft and getting ready to play Japanese baseball. And it was really neat to see this tradition when everyone lines up at home plate in a straight horizontal line, and then you take off your hat and you bow. You follow the traditions of Japan. That was really neat to participate in that. You did that at the beginning of the game, you did it at the end of the game. But once again, you had tryouts. And I remember in minor leagues, I played shortstop. Now, shortstop is pretty much reserved for, I guess you would say, maybe the more athletic players. Usually a shortstop, you have to have a lot of range. You have to have a strong arm for when the ball goes in the hole just between short and third. You got to be able to turn around, make that strong throw back to first base, make a throw to second base to turn a double play, or to come up after the second baseman throws it to you to turn a double play to throw it at first base. Usually the captain is kind of like the shortstop or the pitcher or the center fielder. It's somebody in a position where you have to constantly be able to conversate and communicate. So I played shortstop the first year, and we just did a lot of drills. And the 2 coaches for the minor leagues was, Coach Preciado and his son Travis Preciado. He played on the team. He was a catcher. And oh man, I just remember where he lived, where everyone lived, and just the times that we had. The season would start up like around just when spring was coming up. So I'd say like March, April, and then it would end like in the fall. So that's a lot of time to be playing baseball. And like I said, we played every Sunday. We had trips to other cities. Of course, Yokota Air Force Base is close to Fusa City. It's in Fusa City. So we played Fusa. We played teams like Hachioji. We would go out and play teams out in the Tokyo metropolitan area. It was just a really fun time to have a certain camaraderie. We were so young, but we were just learning so much at that time. Like I said, it wasn't for the faint of heart. And the coaches at times, they would discipline us. They would let us know when we were doing something wrong, sometimes quite loudly in comparison to how things are today. Not knocking anything that goes on today, but it was a different time those years ago. I wouldn't take it away for a second, for a minute. It's some of my best years in my childhood. But I remember my parents coming to the games. It was a little bit weird because, like I said, our games are always on Sundays, and we always played double headers. So if we were traveling, we left early in the morning. We came back like late in the afternoon. And I was always going to church or whatnot, so I would miss church on Sundays. But as soon as the season was over, church every Sunday, make sure that we're there. But yeah, it was just a really fun time to play for the Yokota Tigers. There was a number of teammates that I had that played on the minors. One of my better friends, actually my best friend at that time earlier, Josh Benner, Carl Thompson, shout out to Carl Thompson, shout out to Victor Hawkins, shout out to, oh my goodness, I don't want to be forgetting, as I already mentioned, Travis Preciado. I'll just mention a number of names across the 3 leagues, and I'll revisit them throughout this process. But Chris Brooks, his dad was a coach on the senior leagues as well. Coach Proctor, who else? James Holiday, a number of other players that played with the Yokota Tigers. But just from my perspective, I just remembered, Josh, Carl, Victor, James, Chris. The reason why I mentioned them is because if other people look at this podcast and they say, well, you didn't mention this person, that person. Well, we're all in the same class. So as you move up, but then you have people who are older than you and are in a different class. So you have other players that I played with them, but I wasn't as close because we weren't in the same age bracket. So if I moved up to majors, I was 11, but then we had 12-year-olds up there that I didn't really associate with, but I had to associate once I moved up. But anyway, we were consistently playing the Japanese, and we have the military in Japan. And, this was just kind of a really good way to have and continue those great relations or good relations that we had. We got to see a bit of their culture, they got to see a bit of our culture. And also, if there's any Japanese baseball player that played against us in those times, if you grew up in Japan, you're playing baseball or whatnot, pretty much all of the fields are on dirt or gravel. We went to travel to play some of these teams. I remember we used to go out to Tama River. They had some baseball fields out by Tama River near the Yokota Air Force Base. But part of the tradition was you would kind of go through and pick the rocks, like the big rocks, because anyone who plays baseball knows is that you want true hops. What is true hops? No, for all my basketball players, ain't talking about you jumping up and dunking over somebody, all right? True hops is when a batter hits the ball and it hits that dirt or it hits the grass, you want to be able to calculate how it's going to bounce to you. Now, there's some that might say that, oh, well, part of being a baseball player is that you have to be able to move and adapt if there is a bad hop or something like that. But no, you want true hops, because if the ball is bouncing, you think it should go bam, bam, bam. If it's not a true hop, it hits the gravel and then it goes off somewhere. Every once in a while, it'll take a weird hop. And you didn't want that. Plus, we're kids. Sometimes when it takes a bad hop, it pops up and hits you in the face or hits you some other place that I won't say, but I think you kind of get the idea in the lower regions. But, when we went to the Japanese fields, we would kind of walk the field and help them kind of remove some of the gravel. But, man, you should have seen the faces of some of those Japanese baseball players when they came on base to our field, because, point intended, they were like little kids in a candy store, because like I said, they're coming from, these fields are dirt, all dirt. They're still really good fields, but they're multi-purpose. So if you're going to like a schoolyard will have just a large part, and they'll turn that into a baseball field, and they just use it for a bunch of things. On the base, we had a multitude of different baseball fields. So when they saw grass, just beautiful green grass in the outfield, and how we chalked up everything, baseball field, solely dedicated baseball field, they were just like, oh my goodness gracious. So, they conducted their pregame drills, batting practice. They did a lot of that all in the grass. But yeah, Yokota Tigers was not for the faint of heart. The coaches came out from the get-go and said, hey, look, you got to try out. Now, my dad would tell you, look, I was pretty much already on the team because I was pretty good at that age, a 9 to 10-year-old range. I played shortstop. But yeah, they would come out from the get-go and they tell all the parents that it's the base team. We're playing some really good competition. And in order for us to compete, we got to have these tryouts and prepare your kids for a certain type of discipline instilled to help prepare us for us. Because the Japanese, like I said, they had their head shaved. When the Japanese coaches came up, they took their hat off, they bowed their head, they listened, they took it, and they went back out on the field. They made a mistake, this, that, and the other. So we kind of mirrored it on our own way, so to speak. But they would say a number of times, if you don't like it, if you don't like how much we're practicing, if you don't like the drills and how repetitive things have to be, if you want to be as good as, they are at the sport, then you can go to the Boys and Girls Club. You can go to the youth services, because there you can participate and you can have a good old time. You don't have to worry about yelling at you. All the right things will be said. Understand, it's a baseball team. We want to compete with, these individuals from the host nation that are taking this, undoubtedly, I know for a fact, I have played against a number of kids who turned out to be professional baseball players in Japan, because we played all over. So what kind of culminated the end of our season, every year we had this big tournament. It was called the Friendship Tournament. It was called the Friendship Tournament because, once again, Tomodachi in Japan means friend. Every year, the base has what they call the Friendship Festival, and it's 2 days basically where they open up the base, and then there's a lot of goods there being sold. There's concerts, there's things on both sides of the host nation, and then you have the United States military. There's jets, there's planes. It's basically like one huge carnival where, we show this friendship that we've been able to continue for X amount of time. So the Friendship Tournament is kind of that version of it. Doesn't happen at the same time as the Friendship Festival, but every year we had a friendship tournament that was hosted by us, and it featured, oh golly, how many teams? I want to say probably 30 to 40 teams that came out for this friendship tournament. I remember like the opening ceremony. So they lined up all the teams in the outfield, but they would line them up, and I remember just being in awe, just like the first time I was out there, and I was like, oh my goodness gracious, look at all these teams here. So you had just all the number of cities locally around the area, but then you had teams coming all the way from Tokyo. Typically speaking, the teams from Tokyo were a little bit better. Let me kind of give you as far as what the skill level was. So, I mean, all of us could hit, all of us could field. There were never that many errors. In the youth services, quite honestly, there's a lot of opportunity for people to not really understand the game as much. They don't hit the ball as well. They don't throw the ball. They tend to make a lot more errors. As a 9-10-year-old, the coach hit a ground ball to me and I threw it over the first baseman's head. Oh, Ricky, what the heck is going on? We would spend like the first 15-20 minutes just warming up. All right, here you go. And everything's about repetition. Just get the ball to first base, throw it there, hard, quick, fast. No lollipops, no sailing the ball. The quickest way to get it there is a straight line. Ground balls, fly balls. We did everything at the minor league level that you can think of to prepare us at such a young age. Now, from my perspective, the 1 year I played with minors, that team that we had was just really loaded. A lot of the players I just mentioned on that team were really, really good. The 1 year I played for the minor leagues, we actually went to the championship game of the Friendship Tournament. And mind you, baseball, takes time, all right? It's not like basketball where if you have a basketball tournament, you have pool play, you can play like 3 or 4 games or 5 games in a day, depending on where you start in the early mornings and going all the way into the night. You can play that many games. Baseball is just one of those games, there's no time limit. We played 7 innings. You would go up into a certain point unless there was, a rain out or something like that. So basically you played 1 game every week. So all the teams show up, and then you had all the games scheduled out. And then you played, and then basically it was just single elimination all the way down until you got to an eventual champion. So we worked our way through the minor league friendship tournament to the championship game. Once again, we're hosting it on the east side of the base where they had the youth center there. I believe it's still there now. But anyway, it's packed because we're in the championship game. There's been so many teams that have come and gone. They're eliminated. I don't even remember what team we were playing, but this team was legit. But we were just really, more talented than them. And I remember I actually hit a grand slam in that game. It was actually in the park. I hit an in the park grand slam in that game, but we ended up winning the game pretty convincingly. We scored a lot of runs in one of the later innings, and then we went on to hold on. But yeah, there was just a lot of people in the crowd, a lot of people going crazy. It was really good for the program that year. That minor league team, we went out and we won a lot. that year. We would go out to the other Japanese baseball fields and play the teams, and we would beat them. There were some games that we lost, but when we had the friendship tournament here, that's when we chose to really put on a show, and we did. So I never played youth services baseball after that initial year of playing for the Yokota Tigers. Once again, just for myself personally, I can't speak for any of my other mates as far as how they speak, but I would guess that they feel the same way. I always looked at youth services as kind of a, I don't want to play that because I want to be known as the best. I want to be challenged. I want to play. I want to continue to develop this relationship with a lot of these Japanese kids and whatnot. Later on, I'll talk about when I do the next episode in the majors or whatnot, some of the different activities that we did with them. But I wanted something to challenge me. I really loved baseball. It was just a time that I really learned a lot as far as how to hone your craft and how to get better at something. You just can't go to one practice a week and expect to get better if you truly want to get better. Like, somebody who complains about not getting better but doesn't put in the work is not going to get better unless you're like an X-Men or something, and anything that you see you automatically can do. I'm telling you, I can't stress that enough just how intense some of the practices were, even at 9 and 10 years old. Like, I mean, I don't want to say we were just being dragged through the mud or anything, but, we came out and we'd run laps around the field. If we made a mistake, we'd run laps around the field. If we made another mistake, we'd run laps around the field more. The best thing about the Yokota Tigers is that because we were so much around each other, those ended up being like my friends. I actually hung out with them. We went out and played video games. We played other sports together. But we always came back and played baseball. If you were to ask us this back then, we probably would have a different answer. But looking back on hindsight, we were basically a model for how we wanted to present Yokota. It's like, hey, we're over here, we're a long way from home, but we're here to show that we love the game of baseball. We would love to play it with you, have a competitive game, and after that, go ahead and chalk it up, have a good time until the next time. So, golly, what else can I say about the Yokota Tigers? I mean, there were certain aspects from the youth services that came up to the Yokota base team. So, of course, the pitchers every year. So we had our own baseball cards and things of that nature. I'll talk about that in the next episode, how I got into collecting baseball cards and stuff. 9 to 10-year-old minor league baseball was me just getting into a sport, learning the craft, knowing what it takes to, when you have the talent, develop your game even more to turn that into like a skill that you can, complete and have through the rest of your life. So my dad came out and basically he told me I was kind of a natural, and then somebody he knew of, Coach Hawkins, kind of reached out to him, and then I tried out for the team, immediately was placed on the team as the starting shortstop, and then we went on to win the friendship tournament that year where it was just jam-packed. So like I said, this is just the first episode when I'm talking about the Yokota Tigers, the minor league level. It was just so much of a difference between the youth services and the and the base team, because literally I don't want to seem like it's wrong. God, they don't say it. Sometimes we felt like the youth service was kind of like little sissies sometimes, complaining about stuff. It's like, somebody would miss a ground ball and they just be like, it's okay, try again. It's okay, try again. It's okay. No, it's not okay. Man, if you can't cut it, sorry. You can't cut it. So that's the type of things that would go on at the Yokota Tigers. Like I said, totally different time. That's how you communicated. But all the parents, what was the great thing? All the parents and all the kids were on board for it. And if you came home and you complained, oh, so-and-so yelled at me, blah, blah, blah. So what happened? I couldn't. What you got to do, you got to practice. You got to make sure as you hone your craft. If it's something that you feel like you're not ready for, you don't want to do, then I'll talk to the coach and then, oh, no, I want to do it. I can do it. And then 9 times out of 10, you get in there and you put in the hard work and you were repetitive with it and you did it the same way every time. It worked out for you. And then the coaches did an excellent job of rewarding you for it and letting you know in front of everybody, showing you. So it's like, they ridicule you in front of everybody, but they also would give you recognition and see, look, listen to what Ricky did. He couldn't catch a ground ball for nothing, yesterday, but look at him. He's put in the work and look at him now. He hasn't made an error in 3 months. You guys aren't even putting in the work. You need to be more like Ricky. You guys can do it. Not to say it would happen like that every time, But that was the type of conversation and what type of thing you had to expect from and see from the coaches. We are competing with this extremely disciplined culture of Japan, whereas, honestly, athletically, we were always a little bit better, I would say. And this is, once again, just from the teams that I played on. But the Japanese always had that discipline, and it's like they all feel the ball the same way. They catch the ball, feel it, throw it. I mean, their mechanics were just on point. Every one of them were on point. You very rarely saw one of them that wasn't good or didn't have that mechanical aspect to their game. But that was because if you didn't, you weren't on the team, period. We said, look, if you don't have the skill, if you don't have the talent, if you're not willing to put in the work, don't even come out here. We're on here, we're representing the base. We want to compete, you want to win. We need people who are dedicated. If you're not dedicated, then that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but this is not the place for you. You need to go to youth services where everybody is going to get some playing time. Everybody is going to get a trophy or get a medal or something like that. So we had things like that back then, but there was a base team for certain age groups where that was the top tier. We were like the all-star team. Tremendous experience. Really loved it. It was great to kind of chalk it up with my dad and kind of relive some of it. That was just the minor leagues. I'll get back in the next episode with majors. The third part, I'll talk about the seniors. I'll talk a little bit about what I was doing around those months as I was playing baseball, because I was playing other sports as well, but I get more into that when I talk about the majors as far as that. So one thing I also wanted to mention, baseball is one of those sports, it can be a little expensive too, because there's a number of types of gear that you have to have. If you're going to be practicing on your own, you need baseballs. So you have to go to the store and buy baseballs. You need a baseball mitt. If you're a first baseman, you have a first baseman's mitt. A lot of times first basemen play also catchers, so they have to have a first baseman's mitt. They have to have a catcher's mitt, and then a regular mitt, just because if they're going to play somewhere else. I play shortstop, so I didn't have to worry about that immediately when I was in the minors. But also you need cleats. And while back then, the military demographic, there was a lot more people on the military installation. So a lot of times the military installation, depending on how much they carry, is dependent on how many people is there. So the more people you have, the better assortment your base exchange is going to have, all right? So at that time, we had a lot more people. So the exchange was really, really good for providing things as far as across all the sports. But because we are in Japan, and Japan is such a big fan of baseball, and you would go to like the mall, I believe now it's called the Moritown Mall, but back then it was called Espa, and they had a sports store there, and that's where my mom and dad used to always take me to get all of my baseball gear. So I got my batting gloves, I got my baseball mitts, I got my cleats, the metal cleats. Yeah, the cleats I got were Mizuno, which is a notable brand in Japan. I'm not sure if it still is now, but Mizuno back in the day, we would go there every year because, you got to replace the mitt every once in a while, but you got to break it in. How do you break it in? You get a ball and you just put a ball in it and, wrap a rubber band around it and just leave it in there. And you need to break it in because it's really stiff when you first get it. And then once you break it in, man, it's just like, woo, you can catch anything. Man, I just thought about that. I remember just my dad and my mom taking me to those stores to get all the new gear. Big shout out to my mom. And the reason why I say that is because first and foremost, all the games were on Sunday, so I was missing a lot of church or whatnot. But you ever play baseball and me playing shortstop, the infield is in the dirt. So there are a number of times I'm diving for the ball, or a number of times where it's really windy and the dust is blowing. So you come home and I just got dirt stains and grass stains and from practice. And we're practicing 3 to 5 days a week sometimes for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And my mom was a soldier. She'd go to work, early in the morning, come back, and would go over us with our schoolwork, and then how I was practicing everything. Then she washed the clothes, and I don't know what she did to get them stains out, but did an absolute amazing job. Mom, I love you for it. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, you're amazing. Oh man. And then my dad, just thanks for being there. No, thanks for getting me into the sport. Some other kind of traditions that we had with the Yokota Tigers is that, in youth services, typically speaking, at the end of every game, we'd have one person bring the snacks or something like that, the orange slices. So that was something that carried over to the base team as well, but it was just further amplified because, Yeah, once again, we are going through so much. And I ain't gonna lie, there was more than a few times where there were some tears in our eyes from the practices and from the games and stuff like that. But once again, it was all for the better. It really made a lot of us who we are today because of what we had to see at such an early age in order to strive and push to achieve a goal. At least that's how I see it. That's about it for this episode when I'm talking about the Yokota Tigers, the minors, 9 to 10-year-olds. We won the friendship tournament. Man, that was a tremendous feeling. I believe my dad still has some of the medals. He said he's going to send it to me or he's going to send pictures of it. So I may have pictures that I'm showing right here. If I'm not, I'm sorry. Right here, I'm sorry. But once again, thank you guys for liking and subscribing to my podcast. Life of the Party podcast. I've gone all the way back to the beginnings talking about the Yokota Tigers. Stay tuned. You can listen on, of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast. Of course, check out my YouTube channel. That's Ricky Ricardo, or simply put in the Google search Emcee Ricky. You'll see all my videos pop up. That's EMCEE. RICKY. Emcee Ricky. Give me a follow, give me a like, subscribe, and drop me a line. I appreciate you guys once again, but you know what I'm about to say right here, right now. Otsukare sama deshita. I'll see you guys in the future. Ohayo. Ohayo. Ohayo gozaimasu.